When tech mogul Camille Clark stood before a room full of desperate job applicants in downtown Seattle, she never expected her life to change forever. "Challenge me and I'll hire you." She laughed dismissively at the quiet man in the back row, assuming he was just another unemployed dreamer wasting her time. But Ronan Montgomery wasn't ordinary. He was a single father hiding a secret that would shake the foundations of everything. Camille thought she knew about success. What happened next left the billionaire CEO speechless and questioning every decision she'd ever made. In just 60 seconds, this mysterious man would reveal a background so extraordinary that it would transform not only Camille's company, but her entire understanding of what it means to be truly successful. This is the incredible true story of how a chance encounter between a powerful executive and a struggling father became a movement that changed thousands of lives, proving that sometimes the most valuable people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the surface. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the sterile conference room of the Meridian building, casting harsh shadows across the faces of 47 hopeful job applicants. Camille Clark adjusted her Hermes blazer and surveyed the crowd with the calculating gaze that had built her tech empire from nothing into a billion-dollar phenomenon. At 36, she commanded respect in every boardroom from Seattle to Silicon Valley. Her razor-sharp intellect matched only by her reputation for ruthless efficiency. Innovation Dynamics, her software development company, had revolutionized how hospitals managed patient data, making her one of the youngest female billionaires in the Pacific Northwest. But today's mass hiring event wasn't about adding another programmer to the payroll. It was about finding someone extraordinary enough to lead her company's most ambitious project yet, developing artificial intelligence that could predict medical emergencies before they happened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Camille began, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter like a blade, "you're here because my company needs the impossible. We need someone who can think beyond conventional boundaries, who can solve problems that don't yet have solutions." She paused, letting her words sink in as she studied the eager faces before her. Fresh graduates clutched their resumes, experienced professionals straightened their ties, and career changers held their breath, all hoping to catch her attention. "The position pays $300,000 annually, plus equity that could make you wealthy beyond your current dreams," she continued, noting how the room collectively leaned forward. "But here's the catch. I won't be looking at your resumes, your degrees, or your previous experience. Instead, I'm going to present you with a challenge, and whoever impresses me most gets the job on the spot." A murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. This wasn't the typical interview process they'd prepared for. PowerPoint presentations half forgotten in briefcases, while minds raced to anticipate what kind of test this unconventional CEO might devise. Camille walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room and wrote a single number, 847,293. This represents the number of medical errors that occur in U.S. hospitals every year that could be prevented with better predictive technology. "Your challenge is simple. Convince me, in 2 minutes or less, how you would approach reducing this number by 90% within 5 years." Hands shot up around the room like rockets launching skyward. Camille pointed to a young man in the front row wearing a crisp navy suit. "You first." "Well, Ms. Clark, I'd focus on machine learning algorithms that analyze patient vital signs and medical histories to identify patterns that human doctors might miss," he began confidently, diving into technical jargon about data mining and statistical analysis. His answer was polished, rehearsed, exactly what she'd expected from someone fresh out of Stanford's computer science program. Next came a woman with 15 years of experience at Microsoft, who proposed a comprehensive system integration approach. Then a former Google engineer suggested quantum computing applications. Each answer followed predictable patterns, technically sound but lacking the innovative spark Camille desperately needed. As the presentations continued, her attention began to wander toward the back of the room, where a man sat quietly observing the proceedings. Unlike the others, he wasn't frantically taking notes or preparing his pitch. Instead, he seemed to be studying the other candidates with an intensity that intrigued her. His clothes were clean, but clearly not expensive, a simple button-down shirt and khakis that suggested someone more familiar with practicality than boardroom politics. After 23 predictable presentations, Camille's patience had worn thin. The responses all sounded like variations of the same theme: more data, better algorithms, faster processing power. None of them seemed to grasp that the real challenge wasn't technological, it was human. "You, in the back," she called out, pointing toward the quiet observer. "You haven't said anything yet. Do you even want this job, or are you just here for the free coffee?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room as all eyes turned toward him. The man stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm despite being suddenly thrust into the spotlight. "Ronan Montgomery," he said simply, his voice carrying that quiet confidence that immediately commanded attention. "Well, Mr. Montgomery, challenge me and I'll hire you," Camille said with a dismissive laugh, crossing her arms as she prepared for another disappointing presentation. "Show me something I haven't heard before." What happened next would haunt her dreams and reshape her understanding of everything she thought she knew about problem-solving, innovation, and the hidden potential that exists in the most unexpected places. Ronan didn't move toward the whiteboard or launch into a technical explanation. Instead, he asked a question that stopped the room cold. "Ms. Clark, when was the last time you spent 24 hours in a hospital room, watching someone you love fight for their life?" The question hit like a physical blow, unexpected and deeply personal. Camille felt her carefully constructed professional demeanor falter for just a moment. "I'm sorry, what does that have to do with everything?" Ronan interrupted gently, his voice carrying a weight that suggested he spoke from experience rather than theory. "Because the 847,000 medical errors you wrote on that board aren't just statistics. They're people. Parents, spouses, sons and daughters whose lives are forever changed by mistakes that could have been prevented." He paused, letting his words settle over the suddenly silent room. "Everyone here has given you technical solutions, better algorithms, faster computers, more sophisticated data analysis. But they're all trying to fix the wrong problem. The issue isn't that hospitals lack technology, it's that they lack humanity." Camille found herself leaning forward despite her intention to remain detached. There was something in his tone, a combination of pain and hope that suggested this wasn't just theoretical discussion for him. Medical errors don't happen because doctors are incompetent or because hospitals lack advanced equipment. Ronan continued, his eyes never leaving Camille's face. They happen because healthcare has become so focused on efficiency and cost-cutting that it's forgotten the fundamental truth. Every patient is someone's entire world. The room had become so quiet that the building's ventilation system seemed thunderously loud. Even the most confident candidates found themselves reconsidering their carefully prepared presentations. "So here's my solution," Ronan said, finally, moving closer to the front of the room. "Before we build better artificial intelligence, we need to restore human intelligence to healthcare. We need to create systems that don't just predict medical emergencies. We need to create environments where those emergencies are less likely to occur in the first place." Camille felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of truth that she hadn't expected to find in a room full of job applicants. This man wasn't just offering a different approach to the same problem, he was redefining the problem entirely. "You want to reduce medical errors by 90%? Ronan asked, his question hanging in the air like a challenge. "Stop thinking like a software company and start thinking like a family member who's terrified of losing someone they love." The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable, filled with the weight of a perspective that none of them had considered. Camille realized that her heart was racing, that something about this quiet man's approach had touched a nerve she didn't even know existed. For the first time in her professional career, the woman who had built an empire on predictive algorithms found herself completely unprepared for what would happen next. The 68th floor of the Columbia Center offered Camille Clark a view of Seattle that most people only experienced in magazines. Her corner office overlooked Elliott Bay, where ferry boats moved like white dots across steel-gray water, while Mount Rainier dominated the horizon on clear days. The space itself was a testament to her success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported Italian furniture, and original artwork that had been featured in Architectural Digest's Power Offices of the Pacific Northwest issue, Innovation Dynamics, occupied 3 full floors of Seattle's tallest building, housing over 400 employees whose work touched millions of lives daily. The company's flagship product, MedPredict, was installed in over 2,000 hospitals nationwide, analyzing patient data to prevent complications before they became critical. Revenue had grown by 300% in the past 2 years, making Camille one of the most successful entrepreneurs under 40 in the entire technology sector. Her typical day began at 4:30 a.m. with a workout in her building's private gym, followed by meditation and a breakfast of steel-cut oats and organic berries consumed while reviewing overnight performance reports from international markets. By 6 a.m., she was in the office, leading video conferences with development teams in Prague and Bangalore, before most of Seattle had finished their first cup of coffee. Board meetings, investor calls, and strategic planning sessions filled her calendar in 15-minute increments, each appointment meticulously orchestrated by her assistant, Patricia, who had been with the company since its founding. Lunch was usually a protein bar eaten during product demonstrations, while dinner consisted of takeout from whatever restaurant could deliver to the Columbia Center after 9 p.m. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The financial metrics of her success were staggering. Her personal net worth exceeded $1.2 billion, most of it tied up in Innovation Dynamics stock that continued climbing as the company expanded into new markets. She owned a penthouse apartment in Belltown worth $8 million, a vacation home in the San Juan Islands, and a collection of vintage cars she rarely had time to drive. Business publications regularly featured her on their covers, with headlines like The Algorithm Queen and Seattle's Billion-Dollar Visionary. Speaking engagements at technology conferences commanded 6-figure fees, while her insights on artificial intelligence and healthcare innovation were quoted in academic papers and government policy reports. But beneath the impressive surface, Camille's life had become a carefully orchestrated performance with an audience of one. The penthouse apartment, despite its stunning views and museum-quality furnishings, felt more like a luxury hotel room than a home. She ate most meals alone, scrolling through market reports on her tablet while picking at salads from restaurants where celebrities dined and tech moguls negotiated billion-dollar deals. Her relationships existed primarily in professional contexts, strategic partnerships rather than personal connections. The last serious romantic relationship had ended 18 months earlier when David, a venture capitalist from San Francisco, complained that she cared more about quarterly earnings than quality time. The breakup had been conducted via video conference while she was traveling to a client presentation in Boston, a detail that had stung more than she'd admitted at the time. Family connections had become equally transactional. Her parents, both retired professors from the University of Washington, received expensive gifts delivered by personal shopping services, rather than visits from their increasingly distant daughter. Holiday gatherings felt like corporate events, where she presented annual reports on her company's growth, while struggling to remember the names of her Cousin's children. The irony wasn't lost on her that someone who had built a career on preventing human suffering through technological innovation found herself increasingly isolated from the human connections that gave life meaning. Her company's mission statement spoke eloquently about improving lives through predictive healthcare technology, but her own life had become a predictable routine, devoid of surprise, spontaneity, or genuine emotional connection. Sleep had become another metric to optimize rather than a source of restoration. She tracked EREM cycles through a sophisticated monitoring system, adjusted bedroom temperature and humidity to precisely calibrated levels, and maintained a pharmaceutical-grade supplement regimen designed to maximize cognitive performance. Yet she often lay awake at 2 a.m., staring at the city lights and wondering why success felt so much like sophisticated loneliness. The transformation from ambitious graduate student to tech mogul had happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. During her MBA program at Stanford, she had dreamed of using technology to solve meaningful problems, inspired by her grandmother's struggle with diabetes and the medical errors that had complicated her treatment. Those early ideals had driven Innovation Dynamics' founding, but somewhere along the path to billion-dollar valuations, the human faces behind the medical statistics had become abstractions. Her office walls displayed awards, patents, and framed articles chronicling the company's growth, but no personal photographs or mementos that reflected life outside corporate achievement. The only exception was a small framed quote from her grandmother: "Success isn't what you accomplish for yourself, it's what you make possible for others." The words had guided her through the early years of building Innovation Dynamics, but lately, they felt more like an accusation than inspiration. Speaking engagements and industry panels had become opportunities to deliver carefully crafted messages about technological innovation rather than genuine conversations about human needs. She could recite statistics about healthcare, efficiency and cost reduction with the precision of someone who had studied the data obsessively, but she struggled to remember the last time she had visited a hospital as anything other than a potential client. The hiring event that morning had been conceived as a publicity stunt as much as a recruitment strategy. Local media outlets were covering the unconventional CEO's innovative approach to talent acquisition, and the story would likely generate positive coverage for Innovation Dynamics' brand as a forward-thinking employer. She had expected to find a qualified candidate who could contribute to their artificial intelligence initiatives while providing compelling content for the company's marketing team. What she hadn't expected was to be challenged by someone who seemed to understand that behind every medical error statistic was a human story of loss, fear, and the desperate hope that technology might prevent other families from experiencing similar pain. Ronan Montgomery's question about spending 24 hours in a hospital room had pierced through her carefully constructed professional armor, forcing her to confront the reality that she had become an expert on healthcare technology without maintaining any meaningful connection to healthcare humanity. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her office floor, Camille found herself replaying his words and wondering when she had stopped seeing patients as people and started seeing them as data points in an optimization algorithm. The question unsettled her in ways she couldn't fully articulate, suggesting that the most important solutions might require not just better technology, but a fundamental reconnection with the human experiences that technology was supposed to serve. For the first time in years, the woman who had built an empire on predictive algorithms found herself completely unable to predict what might happen next. The coffee shop 3 blocks from the Meridian building buzzed with the typical afternoon energy of downtown Seattle, but Ronan Montgomery sat alone at a corner table, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. He nursed a single cup of black coffee that had long since grown cold, his attention focused on a worn notebook filled with sketches and calculations that would have impressed any engineering professor who happened to glance over his shoulder. Unlike The other job applicants who had fled the building immediately after Camille Clark's unconventional interview process. Ronan had lingered in the area as if he had nowhere urgent to be. His appearance was unremarkable, medium height, brown hair that needed a trim, and clothes that spoke of someone who prioritized function over fashion. But there was something in his posture, the way he held himself, that suggested depths. Beneath the ordinary surface, the notebook he worked in was filled with designs that defied easy categorization. Medical devices that looked like they belonged in science fiction movies sat alongside sketches of playground equipment and detailed floor plans for spaces that seemed designed to accommodate people with varying physical capabilities. His handwriting was precise, the kind developed through years of technical documentation, but interspersed with personal notes written in a different pen. Reminders about Tyler's soccer practice and parent-teacher conference Thursday. A closer observer might have noticed the slight tremor in his left hand, barely perceptible but present, nonetheless. Or the way he occasionally paused mid-sentence to stare out the window, as if seeing something that existed only in memory. His wedding ring, though still worn on his left hand, had the worn quality of someone who had been married for years, yet he sat alone with the comfortable solitude of someone accustomed to his own company. The notebook itself told a story for anyone curious enough to piece together the clues. Page after page of medical device prototypes suggested someone with extensive knowledge of healthcare technology, while margin notes referenced patents and research papers that indicated serious academic background. Yet mixed throughout were simpler sketches, modifications to standard wheelchairs, designs for sensory-friendly environments, and detailed studies of how to make public spaces more accessible for people with developmental differences. When his phone buzzed with a text message, Ronan's entire demeanor shifted. The intensity that had characterized his work with the notebook gave way to immediate warmth as he read what was apparently a message from his son. His response was typed with the careful deliberation of someone who took every word seriously. Proud of you for trying something new today. Can't wait to hear about art class tonight. Love you, Dad. The barista had refilled his coffee cup twice without being asked. A small kindness that Ronan acknowledged with genuine gratitude, despite being clearly lost in thought. Local coffee shop staff often developed soft spots for regular customers, and his presence suggested familiarity with the routine of spending long hours in public spaces with free Wi-Fi and patient proprietors. His backpack, sitting beside his chair, was practical rather than stylish, the kind carried by someone who needed to transport laptops, notebooks, and emergency supplies for unexpected situations. A medical alert bracelet was partially visible beneath his shirt sleeve, while his wallet, glimpsed briefly when he paid for coffee, contained cards that included medical insurance, a library card, and what appeared to be contact information from multiple healthcare providers. The way he had spoken during the interview suggested someone accustomed to advocating for others, familiar with navigating complex systems and explaining technical concepts to people who might not share his background. His question to Camille about spending time in hospital rooms hadn't been theoretical posturing. It carried the weight of lived experience, of someone who had spent countless hours in medical waiting rooms and understood intimately how healthcare systems affected real families. Yet there were contradictions in his presentation that defied easy categorization. His technical knowledge appeared sophisticated enough to hold his own with any engineer and innovation dynamics employ, but his current circumstances suggested someone working well below his capabilities. The notebook contained designs that could potentially revolutionize medical device accessibility, yet he was applying for employment rather than pitching investors on STARTUP opportunities. When he finally closed the notebook and prepared to leave the coffee shop, Ronan moved with the deliberate care of someone managing invisible challenges. He packed his belongings methodically, checked his phone for messages, and took a moment to organize his thoughts before standing. The transition from sitting to standing was accomplished smoothly, but with the cautious precision of someone who had learned to be mindful of physical limitations. His destination appeared to be the metro bus stop outside, where he joined the queue of afternoon commuters heading toward residential neighborhoods south of downtown. Unlike many of the other passengers absorbed in smartphones or tablets, Ronan used the waiting time to observe his surroundings with the attentive awareness of someone trained to notice details that others might overlook. The notebook remained partially visible in his backpack, its pages filled with innovations that could potentially transform how society accommodated people with disabilities and chronic health conditions. Yet the man who had created these designs was heading home on public transportation, to a life that seemed far removed from the high-stakes world of technology entrepreneurship. As the bus arrived and Ronan found a seat near the back, he pulled out his phone to send another text message. This one was longer, apparently explaining his day to someone who cared enough to ask detailed questions about how things had gone. His responses suggested someone accustomed to being accountable to others, to sharing both successes and disappointments with people who had invested emotional energy in his well-being. The dichotomy was striking: a man with extraordinary technical capabilities and innovative insights living a life that appeared ordinary, even constrained. His response to Camille's challenge had revealed someone capable of reframing complex problems in ways that could revolutionize entire industries. Yet he remained an enigma whose true story was hidden beneath layers of carefully maintained privacy. Bus pulled away from downtown Seattle, carrying Ronan Montgomery toward whatever life awaited him beyond the gleaming towers of the business district. But the questions his presence had raised lingered in the air like unsolved equations, promising revelations that could transform not just individual lives, but entire approaches to innovation, accessibility, and the relationship between technology and human dignity. For anyone paying attention, it was clear that this seemingly ordinary passenger was anything but ordinary, and that the story he carried with him was far more complex and compelling than his modest appearance might suggest. The University of Washington's engineering building hummed with the familiar energy of late-night innovation sessions. But in 2018, one laboratory consistently drew attention from professors and graduate students alike. The Biomedical Engineering Research Lab had become the unofficial headquarters for what many considered the most promising disability accessibility research on the West Coast, led by a doctoral candidate whose work was already attracting interest from major medical device manufacturers. Ronan Montgomery had been 28 then, pursuing his PhD in biomedical engineering with a focus that combined cutting-edge technology with practical applications for people living with neurological conditions. His dissertation research on adaptive interfaces for individuals with motor impairments had earned him recognition from the National Science Foundation, along with a research grant that funded his laboratory work and provided a generous stipend for living expenses. Academic publications regularly featured his innovations, devices that could translate minimal muscle movement into complex computer commands, allowing people with severe physical limitations to control their environment with unprecedented precision. His adaptive keyboard designs had been licensed by 3 major technology companies, while his work on eye-tracking interfaces was being tested in rehabilitation hospitals across the country. Dr. Sarah Chun, his faculty advisor, often told colleagues that Ronan possessed the rare combination of technical brilliance and empathetic understanding that could revolutionize assistive technology. His research wasn't driven by abstract theoretical interest, but by a passionate commitment to expanding possibilities for people whose potential had been limited by inadequate accommodation rather than actual inability. The inspiration for his work came from personal experience that most of his academic colleagues never knew about. Ronan's younger brother Kevin had been born with cerebral palsy, a condition that affected his motor control but left his intellectual capabilities completely intact. Growing up, Ronan had watched Kevin struggle with standard computer interfaces and communication devices that seemed designed by people who had never actually consulted with their intended users. Family dinners at the Montgomery household often resembled engineering brainstorming sessions, with Ronan sketching modifications to Kevin's wheelchair or devising new ways to adapt gaming controllers so his brother could participate in activities that other teenagers took for granted. Their parents, both public school teachers, encouraged this problem-solving approach while saving every penny to afford this specialized equipment. Kevin needed. By his senior year of undergraduate study, Ronan had already published 4 peer-reviewed papers and held provisional patents on 6 different adaptive devices. Tech companies from Silicon Valley were recruiting him for product development positions that offered starting salaries well into 6 figures, while medical device manufacturers competed to fund his graduate research in exchange for licensing agreements on future innovations. The trajectory toward academic and commercial success seemed inevitable. His advisor had already discussed plans for him to establish his own research laboratory after completing his PhD, with preliminary commitments from investors who believed his accessibility innovations could capture significant market share while serving an underserved population. Personal happiness had accompanied professional achievement. During his second year of graduate school, Ronan had met Catherine Walsh, a social worker specializing in disability advocacy, who shared his passion for expanding opportunities for people with diverse abilities. Their relationship developed naturally from shared values and complementary expertise. She understood the social and policy barriers that limited access to opportunities, while he developed technological solutions that could overcome practical limitations. Catherine's work with families navigating disability services had taught her to see beyond medical diagnoses to the unique potential each individual possessed when provided with appropriate support and accommodation. Her insights helped Ronan refine his device designs, ensuring they addressed real-world needs rather than theoretical problems identified in laboratory settings. Their wedding, in June 2019, had been a celebration that reflected their shared commitment to inclusive community building. The ceremony took place in an accessible venue, with accommodations for guests with various disabilities and a reception that demonstrated how thoughtful planning could create environments where everyone could participate fully. The following year brought Tyler's birth, a joyful expansion of their family that filled their modest apartment near campus with the chaos and wonder of new parenthood. Ronan adapted his research schedule to share overnight feedings and diaper changes, often working through complex engineering problems, while rocking his son to sleep in the early hours of morning. Life had seemed to be unfolding according to plan. PhD completion scheduled for 2021, followed by either launching a startup focused on accessibility technology or accepting a faculty position that would allow him to continue research while building a sustainable career. Catherine's advocacy work was gaining recognition from state agencies, while Tyler's development progressed normally through all the milestones that first-time parents tracked with such careful attention. The diagnosis came without warning during a routine checkup in February 2021. Catherine had been experiencing headaches and occasional confusion that they attributed to sleep deprivation from caring for a toddler while maintaining demanding professional schedules. But the MRI revealed something far more serious than parental exhaustion: glioblastoma multiforme, an aggressive brain tumor with a prognosis that shattered their carefully constructed plans like glass hitting concrete. Stage 4, the oncologist explained gently, which meant treatment focused on quality of life rather than cure, measured in months rather than years. The next 18 months became a devastating education in how quickly circumstances could transform successful, independent people into families dependent on medical systems, insurance bureaucracies, and the kindness of extended support networks. Catherine's condition deteriorated rapidly despite aggressive treatment, requiring constant care that made Ronan's continued academic work impossible. He took a leave of absence from his PhD program to become her primary caregiver, learning to navigate feeding tubes, medication schedules, and the complex logistics of home healthcare. Tyler, barely 2 years old, required explanation for why mommy couldn't play the way she used to, why daddy seemed sad even when he smiled, and why their apartment filled with medical equipment that made ordinary activities complicated. Catherine's death in August 2022 left Ronan to face single parenthood while processing grief that threatened to overwhelm his capacity for basic functioning. The life insurance provided some financial breathing room, but not enough to support extended time away from employment. His research, abandoned mid-project, became another casualty of circumstances beyond anyone's control. Returning to complete his PhD seemed impossible with Tyler requiring constant attention and stability. The academic community that had once celebrated Ronan's potential gradually forgot about the promising researcher, who had simply disappeared from conferences and publications. Patents expired, research grants were reassigned, and the accessibility innovations that could have transformed thousands of lives remained trapped in notebooks and computer files that no one else could interpret. The transition from celebrated researcher to struggling single father happened gradually, each practical compromise leading inevitably to the next. Part-time work provided some income and health insurance, but prevented the focused attention that groundbreaking research required. Tyler's need for stability and routine took precedence over professional ambitions, while grief counseling and single-parent support groups consumed time that had once been devoted to laboratory work. By 2024, Ronan Montgomery had become someone whose extraordinary potential remained hidden beneath the practical necessities of single parenthood and economic survival. His innovative mind still active, but focused on immediate needs rather than revolutionary breakthroughs. The alarm clock's persistent buzzing at 5:30 a.m. marked the beginning of another carefully orchestrated day in the Montgomery household, where every minute was scheduled with the precision of a NASA mission launch. Ronan rolled out of bed with the practiced quiet of someone who had learned to move without waking the sleeping 7-year-old in the next room, his body protesting the early hour with joint stiffness that seemed to worsen each passing month. Their apartment in the Ballard neighborhood was clean but cramped, a 2-bedroom unit in a complex built during the 1980s, where the walls were thin enough that Tyler's occasional nightmares could wake neighbors, and the plumbing made ominous sounds that required constant vigilance. The rent consumed 43% of Ronan's monthly income from his job at Northwest Technical Services, where he troubleshot computer networks for small businesses across Seattle. The work was steady and provided health insurance, 2 factors that mattered more than the fact that his engineering expertise was dramatically underutilized installing email servers and fixing printer connections. His supervisor, Janet Miller, was kind enough to offer flexible scheduling when Tyler had medical appointments or school events, but the hourly wage barely covered basic expenses even with careful budgeting. Morning routines required military-level coordination. Tyler had inherited his mother's stubborn independence along with her dark hair and questioning intelligence. But school mornings remained challenging due to sensory processing issues that made certain clothing textures unbearable, and unexpected schedule changes devastating. Ronan had learned to prepare 3 different breakfast options, lay out clothes the night before, and maintain backup plans for backup plans. The breakfast conversation typically involved Tyler's detailed analysis of whatever book he was currently reading, usually something several grade levels above his age, while Ronan mentally reviewed the day's logistics. Drop off at Jefferson Elementary by 7:45. Bus commute to downtown for his 8:30 start time. Lunch eaten while responding to emails from Tyler's teachers about homework assignments or social situations that required parental attention. Tyler's educational needs added layers of complexity that challenged even Ronan's engineering problem-solving abilities. High intellectual capabilities combined with attention differences meant that regular Classroom instruction often bored him to the point of disruptive behavior, while his sensitivity to noise and bright lights required accommodations that not all teachers understood or consistently implemented. Parent-teacher conferences had become elaborate negotiations where Ronan advocated for modifications that would help Tyler succeed without seeming to demand special treatment that might generate resentment from staff already overwhelmed by large class sizes and limited resources. The discussions required diplomatic skills that he had never needed during his research career, but had become essential for ensuring his son's educational progress. Financial pressure created a constant undercurrent of stress that affected every decision. Health insurance covered basic medical care, but not the occupational therapy sessions that helped Tyler manage sensory overload, or the educational testing that could identify specific learning differences and appropriate interventions. Ronan's evening hours were often spent researching free or sliding scale services, filling out paperwork for assistance programs, and calculating whether they could afford enrichment activities that might help Tyler develop social connections. Notebook that accompanied Ronan everywhere contained not just innovative device designs, but also meticulous budget tracking, appointment schedules, and contingency plans for various scenarios that single parents learn to anticipate. Emergency fund calculations shared pages with sketches for accessibility improvements, while grocery lists were written beside ideas for adaptive technology that could transform lives if he ever found time to develop them properly. Sleep remained elusive despite exhaustion that seemed to accumulate with each passing week. Tyler's bedtime routine required patience and consistency, reading together, discussing whatever anxieties might be troubling him, and ensuring that his bedroom environment was optimized for rest despite the apartment's limitations. But once Tyler was asleep, Ronan's mind often raced through endless lists of responsibilities, concerns, and the persistent awareness that he was one medical emergency or job loss away from serious financial crisis. Social isolation had become an unintended consequence of single parenthood combined with demanding work schedules. Other parents at Tyler's school seemed to move in established social circles where couples organized playdates and family gatherings that didn't easily accommodate a single father trying to manage everything alone. Professional connections from his research days had faded through years of absence from conferences and academic events. The grief over Catherine's death remained present, but transformed. No longer the acute devastation of immediate loss, but a chronic ache that influenced every decision. Tyler's questions about his mother required careful responses that honored her memory, while helping him process emotions too complex for his age. Photographs throughout their apartment served as reminders of the life they had shared, and the future they had planned before illness rewrote their story. Healthcare navigation had become a part-time job in itself. Tyler's pediatrician appointments, regular checkups to monitor his development, and preventive care coordination consumed hours each month. Ronan's own health had suffered from years of prioritizing everyone else's needs, deferred dental work, skipped annual physicals, and stress-related symptoms that he managed through caffeine and determination rather than proper medical attention. Commute between Ballard and downtown Seattle provided thinking time that Ronan both treasured and dreaded. Public transportation offered opportunities to review work emails and plan Tyler's evening activities, but also created space for his mind to drift toward the research projects he had abandoned and the innovations that remained trapped in his notebooks. The gap between his current circumstances and his former potential felt like a physical weight that grew heavier with each passing month. Evening routines were structured around Tyler's needs, homework assistance that often involved helping him navigate social challenges as much as academic content, dinner preparation using ingredients chosen for both nutrition and cost-effectiveness, and activities that would help him wind down from the sensory overload of school days. Bath time conversations revealed Tyler's remarkable insights about his classmates and teachers, along with questions about why other families seemed to have more resources and opportunities. The isolation of single parenthood was most acute during weekend mornings when other families filled parks and community centers with the easy chaos of multiple adults sharing responsibilities. Ronan and Tyler had developed their own traditions: Saturday morning library visits, afternoon cooking projects, and Sunday evening planning sessions, where they discussed the upcoming week's schedule and any concerns that needed addressing. Technology that could transform accessibility for thousands of people remained undeveloped in notebooks that sat beside homework assignments and grocery lists. Brilliant innovations reduced to theoretical exercises because practical survival required every available hour and ounce of energy. The patents that could have generated life-changing income had expired while Ronan focused on ensuring Tyler's immediate needs were met consistently and lovingly. Despite the overwhelming challenges, moments of pure joy still broke through the logistical complexity. Tyler's excitement about discovering a new book, his thoughtful questions about how things worked, and his unconscious modeling of the empathy and resilience he witnessed daily in his father created pockets of hope that sustained them both through the most difficult periods. But as Ronan stood at the bus stop each morning, watching Tyler wave from the school entrance before disappearing into his day, the weight of unrealized potential and constrained possibilities felt like carrying a backpack filled with stones that grew heavier with each step toward a future that bore no resemblance to the life he had once imagined possible. The executive search firm Camille typically employed for senior-level positions charged $50,000 for comprehensive background investigations, but their standard process seemed inadequate for understanding the enigma that was Ronan Montgomery. 3 days after the hiring event, she found herself conducting her own research with the methodical determination that had built Innovation Dynamics into a billion-dollar enterprise. Her initial Google search yielded surprisingly sparse results for someone who had made such an impression during the interview. A few scattered references to academic publications appeared in engineering databases, but nothing recent enough to explain his current circumstances or comprehensive enough to satisfy her growing curiosity about his background. The breakthrough came when she expanded her search parameters to include University of Washington academic records. Suddenly, a different picture began emerging: conference presentations from 2018 and 2019 that showcased innovations in adaptive technology, research grants from the National Science Foundation, and collaborative projects with medical device manufacturers that suggested someone operating at the highest levels of biomedical engineering. Dr. Sarah Chun, still listed as a faculty member in the UW Biomedical Engineering Department, agreed to meet for coffee at a cafe near the university campus. Their conversation revealed details that kept Camille awake for the next 3 nights, forcing her to reconsider everything she thought she understood about talent, potential, and the circumstances that could derail even the most promising careers. Ronan was extraordinary, Dr. Chun explained, her voice carrying the wistful tone of someone remembering an exceptional student who had simply vanished. Not just technically brilliant, but driven by a sense of purpose that made his research genuinely transformative. His work on adaptive interfaces was years ahead of anything else being developed in academic or commercial laboratories. She described research projects that had attracted attention from major technology companies, innovations that could have revolutionized assistive technology markets, while generating substantial licensing revenue for both the university and the inventor. Patent applications filed between 2019 and 2021 demonstrated a mind capable of identifying problems that others hadn't recognized and developing solutions that elegantly addressed complex accessibility challenges. He was scheduled to defend his dissertation in spring 2021. Dr. Chun continued, her expression growing more serious. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Committee approval, industry interest, job offers from both academia and private sector. Then suddenly, he requested a leave of absence for family medical reasons. We expected him back within a semester, maybe 2 at most. but Ronan had never returned. His research remained incomplete. His laboratory space was reassigned to incoming graduate students, and his groundbreaking projects were eventually archived as incomplete work that no one else possessed sufficient background to continue. The university had tried maintaining contact for the first year, offering extensions and accommodations that might allow him to complete his degree remotely, but communication had gradually ceased. "I always wondered what happened," Dr. Chun admitted. Students sometimes struggle with the pressure of doctoral programs, but Ronan seemed to thrive on complex challenges. His leaving was completely out of character for someone so committed to his research mission. Camille's investigation expanded into medical device patent databases, where she discovered a treasure trove of innovations filed under Ronan's name between 2018 and 2020. Adaptive keyboards that could interpret minimal muscle movement, eye-tracking systems that enabled complex computer control, and wheelchair modifications that expanded mobility options for people with varying physical capabilities. Each patent application told the story of someone who understood disability not as limitation but as an opportunity to rethink fundamental assumptions about how technology could serve human needs. The designs were sophisticated enough to attract commercial interest, practical enough for real-world implementation, and innovative enough to establish entirely new market categories, but the patents had expired due to non-payment of maintenance fees, their revolutionary potential returning to public domain, where anyone could manufacture the devices without compensating the original inventor. The timing suggested someone whose circumstances had changed so dramatically that protecting intellectual property became impossible despite its potential value. LinkedIn profiles and professional networking sites provided additional pieces of the puzzle. Ronan's last update was from February 2021, announcing his engagement in family caregiving responsibilities and temporary hiatus from research activities. Prior posts showcased conference presentations, research collaborations, and the kind of professional networking that typically preceded successful academic or industry careers. Colleagues from his graduate school years had occasionally tagged him in posts about accessibility innovation breakthroughs, apparently unaware that the person whose work had inspired their interest was no longer active in the field. Their comments revealed a professional community that still remembered and respected his contributions, but had accepted his disappearance as another casualty of academic pressure or career transition. The financial implications of his abandoned research became clear when Camille consulted with Innovation Dynamics intellectual property attorneys. The expired patents could have generated millions in licensing revenue, while the uncompleted research projects represented innovations that companies were still trying to develop using far inferior approaches. Whoever created these designs understood accessibility technology at a level we rarely see, explained Marcus Webb, the firm's lead patent attorney. The solutions are elegant, practical, and years ahead of current market offerings. If these patents were still active and properly commercialized, they could dominate several emerging technology sectors. The lost potential was staggering, not just for Ronan personally, but for the thousands of people who could have benefited from innovations that remained trapped in expired patents and abandoned research projects. Camille found herself wondering how many other brilliant minds were struggling in circumstances that prevented them from contributing their gifts to solving humanity's most pressing challenges. Her research into Tyler's educational records, conducted through discreet inquiries with her company's education liaison contacts, revealed additional layers of complexity. A 7-year-old reading at high school level, demonstrating mathematical reasoning that impressed elementary school teachers, but requiring accommodations for sensory processing differences that not all educational environments understood or consistently provided. Parent-teacher conference notes, obtained through carefully worded requests framed as potential educational partnership discussions, painted a picture of a single father advocating tirelessly for his son's educational needs, while managing work schedules that provided minimal flexibility for school involvement. Teachers consistently praised both Tyler's intellectual capabilities and Ronan's dedication to ensuring appropriate accommodations were implemented effectively. The elementary school's counselor mentioned during a casual conversation that Tyler occasionally asked thoughtful questions about why some families seemed to have more resources than others, displaying the kind of social awareness that suggested someone processing complex realities despite his young age. His artwork, displayed during school events, often depicted families working together on projects that looked remarkably like engineering schematics translated into 7-year-old artistic expression. Camille's investigation expanded into Seattle's disability advocacy community, where Catherine Walsh Montgomery's name appeared frequently in organizational records and advocacy campaign documentation. Her work with families navigating disability services had earned recognition from state agencies and nonprofit organizations, while her collaboration with biomedical engineering researchers had helped ensure that technological innovations addressed real-world needs rather than theoretical problems. The timeline of Catherine's illness coincided exactly with Ronan's departure from academic research, explaining the abrupt transition from promising doctoral candidate to absent graduate student. Medical records remained private, but advocacy organization tributes, published after her death, described someone who had continued her disability rights work, even while battling terminal illness, helping other families access services and accommodations. Up until her final weeks, the picture that emerged was of a couple whose shared commitment to expanding opportunities for people with disabilities had created a partnership that amplified both their individual contributions. Catherine's advocacy expertise had informed Ronan's technological innovations, while his engineering capabilities had provided practical solutions for barriers she encountered in her social work practice. Their collaboration had produced research papers that bridged the gap between assistive technology development and disability rights advocacy, creating frameworks for ensuring that innovative devices actually met the needs of their intended users. The work represented exactly the kind of human-centered approach to technology development that Innovation Dynamics claimed to prioritize, but rarely achieved in practice. As Camille reviewed the accumulated evidence of Ronan's background, she began to understand that his response during the hiring event hadn't been theoretical pontificating about healthcare humanity. It had been the perspective of someone who had lived intimately with medical systems, who understood exactly how technological solutions could either support or fail the people they were supposedly designed to serve. His question about spending 24 hours in a hospital room had emerged from personal experience of watching someone he loved navigate treatment protocols, insurance bureaucracies, and the often dehumanizing processes that reduced complex human beings to medical diagnoses and billing codes. His insights about the relationship between healthcare technology and healthcare humanity weren't academic observations, they were hard-won wisdom, acquired through circumstances no one would choose to experience. The investigation revealed someone whose potential had been constrained not by lack of ability or ambition, but by life circumstances that had required him to choose between personal aspirations and family responsibilities. His current employment situation represented a dramatic underutilization of extraordinary capabilities, while his innovations remained undeveloped due to practical limitations rather than insufficient vision or technical skill. For the first time in her professional career, Camille found herself confronting the reality that true innovation might require not just identifying talented individuals, but creating circumstances that allowed that talent to flourish despite personal challenges that could derail even the most promising trajectories. The man who had challenged her assumptions about healthcare technology during a routine hiring event was beginning to challenge her assumptions about success, potential, and the responsibility that successful people might have to create opportunities for others whose gifts remained hidden beneath practical necessities. As she sat in her corner office overlooking Elliott Bay, surrounded by the evidence of Ronan Montgomery's extraordinary background and constrained present, Camille began to wonder whether Innovation Dynamics' next breakthrough might come not from hiring someone to solve problems they had already identified, but from creating space for someone to pursue innovations they didn't yet know they needed. The follow-up meeting took place not in Innovation Dynamics' gleaming conference rooms, but in the crowded food court of Westlake Center, where the ambient noise of families and teenagers created an atmosphere more conducive to honest conversation than corporate formality. Camille had suggested the unconventional location, partly to put Ronan at ease, but mostly because she was beginning to understand that meaningful discussions required environments where people could speak as human beings rather than professional personas. Ronan arrived precisely on time, carrying the same worn notebook that had intrigued her during their first encounter, along with a tablet that appeared to be several generations old but meticulously maintained. His appearance was neat but clearly reflected someone who invested money in functionality rather than fashion. Clean jeans, a button-down shirt that had been pressed but showed signs of regular wear, and shoes that prioritized comfort over style. "Thank you for meeting me," Camille began, then paused as she realized how inadequate standard professional courtesy seemed given what she had discovered about his background. "Actually, I need to be honest with you. I've spent the past week researching your work, and I owe you an apology for not recognizing who you are during our first meeting." Ronan's expression shifted from polite attention to something more guarded, the look of someone who had learned to be cautious when people expressed sudden interest in his background. "Dr. Chen mentioned that someone from your company had contacted her," he said quietly. "I assume you discovered that I'm not exactly what I appeared to be during the hiring event." "You're exactly what you appeared to be," Camille replied, surprising them both with the intensity of her response. "Someone who understands that behind every technological challenge is a human story that matters more than the algorithm." "What I didn't realize is that you've spent years developing solutions for problems that my company has been struggling to address using entirely wrong approaches." She opened her laptop and displayed a presentation she had prepared, but instead of corporate slides filled with market analysis and profit projections, the screen showed patent diagrams and research papers that chronicled Ronan's abandoned innovations. These adaptive interface designs could revolutionize how people with motor impairments interact with medical monitoring systems. "Your eye-tracking research addresses accessibility challenges that we've been trying to solve for 3 years without success." Ronan studied the displayed materials with the careful attention of someone seeing their past work presented in a context they hadn't anticipated. "Those patents expired," he said finally. "The research was never completed. Even if the ideas had merit, they exist only as theoretical frameworks without practical implementation or clinical testing. But they could be completed," Camille said, her voice carrying an excitement that she struggled to contain. "Innovation Dynamics has the resources, the testing facilities, and the regulatory expertise to transform these concepts into products that could help thousands of people. What we've been missing is the foundational understanding that you developed during your doctoral research." The conversation that followed revealed layers of complexity that neither of them had anticipated. When they agreed to meet, Ronan described the practical challenges that had forced him to abandon his research, the impossibility of maintaining laboratory schedules while providing round-the-clock caregiving, the financial pressure that made patent maintenance fees unaffordable, and the gradual erosion of professional connections that occurred when survival took precedence over career advancement. "Catherine used to say that my research mattered because it could expand possibilities for people like her brother," Ronan explained, his voice growing softer as he shared memories that clearly remained painful to discuss. "Kevin has cerebral palsy, and we spent years modifying standard technology so he could participate in activities that other people take for granted. Every device I designed was tested first by Kevin, because he could identify usability problems that engineering specifications never addressed. Camille listened with growing understanding as Ronan described the human-centered design process that had guided his research, not starting with technological capabilities and finding applications, but starting with human needs and developing technology sophisticated enough to meet those needs elegantly and affordably. It was exactly the approach that Innovation Dynamics claimed to use, but rarely implemented with the depth of empathy that Ronan's work demonstrated. Your current situation, Camille said carefully, supporting Tyler while working in a position that doesn't utilize your capabilities, that must be incredibly frustrating for someone with your background and potential. Ronan's response revealed a perspective that challenged fundamental assumptions about success and fulfillment that had guided Camille's entire career. I'm not frustrated, he said, surprising her with his sincerity. Tyler is the most important thing I'll ever create. Ensuring his well-being and happiness matters more than any patent or research publication. But you're right that it sometimes feels like potential is being wasted when I see problems that I know how to solve, but lack the resources and time to address properly. The breakthrough moment came when Tyler himself appeared at their table, having finished his after-school program earlier than expected. Camille watched as Ronan's entire demeanor transformed, his face lighting up with genuine joy as he introduced his son with obvious pride and affection. Tyler was remarkable, articulate beyond his years, curious about everything around him, and comfortable engaging with adults in ways that suggested someone accustomed to meaningful conversations. But what struck Camille most was the unconscious way he accommodated his father's needs, organizing papers that had scattered across the table and positioning himself to minimize background noise that seemed to cause Ronan subtle but noticeable discomfort. Dad, did you tell her about the playground project? Tyler asked, apparently unaware that he was revealing information that hadn't yet been shared. The one where you designed equipment that kids like me can use without getting overwhelmed by too much noise and brightness. Ronan's expression suggested mild embarrassment at having his personal projects mentioned, but Tyler continued enthusiastically. He makes drawings of things that could help people, but then he says we can't build them because they cost too much money. I told him that maybe someone with lots of money would want to help, but he says it's more complicated than that. The child's innocent observation cut through weeks of professional complexity to identify the core issue with startling clarity. Resources existed to develop innovations that could transform lives, but connecting those resources with innovative minds required relationships and circumstances that weren't easily established through traditional employment or investment channels. Camille found herself studying the interaction between father and son, noting how Ronan's protective instincts balanced with respect for Tyler's independence, how he provided guidance without overwhelming the boy's natural curiosity, and how their communication reflected years of navigating challenges together. The partnership they had developed was built on mutual understanding, shared problem-solving, and the kind of trust that could only emerge from facing difficulties as a team. Tyler, Camille said, addressing him directly with the same respect. She would show any intelligent person. Your dad's designs could help many families like yours. Would you be interested in seeing some of his ideas turned into real products that people could actually use? The conversation that followed transformed what had begun as a professional consultation into something far more personal and significant. Tyler's questions about how technology could make life easier for people with different needs revealed someone who had inherited both his parents' empathy and his father's analytical thinking. His suggestions for improving accessibility often addressed problems that even sophisticated engineers hadn't considered. Ronan watched his son engage with Camille's questions with a mixture of pride and protective concern, clearly torn between wanting to showcase Tyler's remarkable capabilities and ensure that the boy wasn't being overwhelmed by adult expectations or pressures. The balance he maintained suggested years of experience helping Tyler navigate situations where his intellectual gifts might create unrealistic expectations from adults who didn't understand his other needs. As the afternoon progressed, Camille began to understand that hiring Ronan wouldn't simply be adding another employee to Innovation Dynamics' roster. It would be creating space for someone whose personal experience with accessibility challenges could inform every aspect of the company's product development, from initial concept through final implementation. But more than that, it would be recognizing that innovation emerges not just from technical expertise, but from the kind of deep empathy that develops when people face real-world challenges that existing technology fails to address adequately. Ronan's interrupted research career had given him something that couldn't be taught in graduate programs or acquired through professional experience, the perspective of someone who understood intimately what it meant to need technology that simply didn't exist. "I have a proposition," Camille said finally, her voice carrying the kind of intensity that had characterized her most important business decisions. "But it's not a traditional job offer, and it would require both of us to take risks that could fundamentally change how Innovation Dynamics approaches product development." The moment that followed was charged with possibility and uncertainty, as three people from vastly different circumstances contemplated a collaboration that could transform not just their individual lives, but their capacity to create positive change for communities whose needs had been systematically overlooked by CONVENTIONL technology development. Tyler's presence had revealed something that Camille hadn't expected to find during the business meeting, the recognition that the most innovative solutions might emerge when personal experience, technical expertise, and resource availability aligned in ways that allowed human potential to flourish without requiring people to choose between family responsibilities and professional contribution. For the first time since building her company, Camille found herself considering whether true success might be measured not by profit margins or market share, but by the positive impact that their work could have on families like the one sitting across from her, whose extraordinary potential had been constrained by circumstances rather than capability. The Innovation Dynamics board meeting that would ultimately reshape the company's entire strategic direction began with Camille presenting what appeared to be a conventional product development proposal. The conference room on the 67th floor overlooked Seattle's tech corridor, where competing companies housed in gleaming towers pursued innovations that would capture market share and investor attention in increasingly crowded fields. "Members of the board," Camille began, her presentation slides displaying market research and competitive analysis that followed familiar patterns of corporate decision-making. "I'm proposing that we establish a new division focused specifically on accessibility technology, with projected revenue potential of $50 million within 3 years, and significant opportunities for government contracts and nonprofit partnerships." The 12 board members, venture capitalists, industry veterans, and strategic investors whose combined experience spanned decades of technology development, responded with the kind of polite attention typically reserved for presentations that seemed technically sound but commercially unexciting. Accessibility technology was widely regarded as a niche market with limited profit potential, hardly the kind of revolutionary breakthrough that had made Innovation Dynamics a billion-dollar enterprise. But Camille's next slide changed the room's energy completely. Instead of projected profit margins and market penetration analysis, the screen displayed patent diagrams and research documentation that demonstrated technical innovations years ahead of anything currently available in commercial markets. Adaptive interfaces that could transform minimal physical input into complex digital control, eye-tracking systems that enabled sophisticated computer interaction, and sensory-friendly design principles that could expand technology access for underserved populations. "These innovations already exist," Camille continued, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had identified a competitive advantage that others had overlooked. The research has been completed, the designs have been tested, and the foundational work has been done. What's been missing is the resources and infrastructure to transform these concepts into products that can reach the people who need them most. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the board's technology advisor and former Stanford engineering professor, leaned forward with obvious interest. Where did this research originate? These designs address problems that our development teams have been struggling with for years, but the approaches shown here are far more sophisticated than anything we've seen from university laboratories or competing companies. Camille's answer introduced the board to Ronan Montgomery, but not as a potential employee whose background would be evaluated according to conventional hiring criteria. Instead, she presented him as the architect of breakthrough innovations that could establish Innovation Dynamics as the definitive leader in accessibility technology, while serving markets that had been systematically underserved by existing technology companies. Mr. Montgomery's research was interrupted by personal circumstances that prevented him from completing his doctoral program or commercializing his innovations, Camille explained, her presentation carefully avoiding details that might compromise Ronan's privacy while emphasizing the extraordinary opportunity his collaboration could provide. We have the chance to partner with someone whose work could define the next decade of assistive technology development. The collaboration that emerged from that board meeting challenged conventional assumptions about employment, partnership, and the relationship between personal circumstances and professional contribution. Rather than offering Ronan a traditional position within Innovation Dynamics' existing structure, Camille proposed creating an entirely new framework that would allow him to pursue his research while maintaining the flexibility that Tyler's needs required. The Adaptive Technology Research Division was established with Ronan as its founding director, but reporting structures and performance expectations were designed around outcomes rather than office hours, innovation rather than administrative compliance. His laboratory was set up in a converted warehouse space in the Georgetown neighborhood, closer to his apartment and designed according to principles that prioritized accessibility and sensory accommodation. Tyler became an unofficial consultant for the division, his insights about user experience helping to refine designs that might otherwise have satisfied engineering specifications without meeting real-world usability standards. His presence in the laboratory during after-school hours and weekend research sessions created an environment where accessibility wasn't an abstract concept, but a daily reality that informed every design decision. The first project they tackled together was the adaptive keyboard system that Ronan had originally developed for his brother Kevin. The expired patents provided a foundation, but 3 years of practical experience with Tyler's evolving needs had revealed improvements that could make the technology more versatile and user-friendly. Camille found herself spending increasing amounts of time in the Georgetown laboratory, initially to monitor project progress and ensure that Innovation Dynamics investment was generating appropriate returns. But gradually, her involvement deepened into genuine collaboration as she discovered that her business expertise could accelerate development timelines while ensuring that innovative products could reach markets efficiently and affordably. Partnership challenged both of them in ways that proved transformative. Ronan's research methodology required patience and iterative testing that conflicted with Camille's preference for rapid development cycles and immediate market deployment. But his insistence on thorough user testing and accessibility consultation prevented costly design mistakes that could have undermined product effectiveness. Camille's business acumen helped Ronan navigate regulatory requirements and manufacturing processes that could have delayed product launch indefinitely. Her understanding of insurance reimbursement systems and healthcare procurement procedures enabled them to design products that wouldn't just meet user needs, but could be acquired by the people who needed them most. Their collaboration sessions often extended into evening hours, with Tyler completing homework assignments while listening to discussions about market strategy, user interface design, and the complex balance between innovation and affordability. His questions frequently identified assumptions that the adults had accepted without examination, leading to design modifications that improved functionality for all users. The breakthrough that validated their approach came during testing of the eye tracking interface system with a focus group of 12 individuals representing various motor impairment conditions. Traditional usability testing might have measured efficiency and accuracy, but Ronan's methodology emphasized emotional response and long-term adaptation potential. Maria Santos, a 20-year-old artist whose multiple sclerosis had progressively limited her fine motor control, became the first person to create digital artwork using the new interface system. Her painting, a landscape that incorporated abstract elements representing her experience of disability, was completed entirely through eye movement and minimal head positioning. For the first time in 3 years, Maria explained through tears that had nothing to do with frustration. "I can create art that expresses what I want to say rather than what my hands are capable of producing. This isn't just assistive technology, it's creative liberation." The emotional impact of that testing session transformed how everyone involved understood the purpose of their work. They weren't just developing products that could capture market share in an underserved sector. They were creating tools that could restore possibilities that people had believed were permanently lost. Camille's perspective on success began shifting as she witnessed the direct impact of innovation that prioritized human dignity alongside technical sophistication. Quarterly earnings reports remained important, but they no longer seemed like the most meaningful measure of whether their work was achieving its intended purpose. The media attention that followed their first product launches exceeded all expectations. Technology publications praised the sophisticated engineering and user-centered design principles, while disability advocacy organizations celebrated the genuine consultation and collaboration that had informed the development process. Orders exceeded production capacity within 6 weeks of commercial availability, but the most significant transformation occurred in innovation. Dynamics' overall corporate culture. The success of the Adaptive Technology Research Division inspired other teams to adopt similar human-centered approaches to product development, leading to innovations in their core medical software that better served both healthcare providers and patients. Tyler's influence extended beyond the Georgetown laboratory as his insights about sensory processing and environmental design informed workspace modifications throughout Innovation Dynamics facilities. The company's headquarters became a model for accessible design that accommodated employees and visitors with various sensory, cognitive, and physical differences. The collaboration between Camille and Ronan evolved into something that neither traditional employment nor conventional business partnership could adequately describe. Their working relationship was built on mutual respect, complementary expertise, and shared commitment to using technology in service of human flourishing rather than simply profit maximization. Evening conversations in the laboratory. With Tyler sleeping peacefully on a comfortable couch while his father and Camille planned the next day's experiments, began to feel like family meetings where professional objectives blended seamlessly with personal care and shared vision for positive change. The financial success that followed their collaboration enabled Ronan to provide Tyler with educational and therapeutic resources that had previously been unaffordable, while Camille discovered that her business skills could serve purposes beyond wealth accumulation. Together, they had created something that neither could have achieved independently, a sustainable framework for innovation that honored both human needs and economic realities. 6 months after their first meeting in Westlake Center's food court, the Adaptive Technology Research Division had become Innovation Dynamics' fastest-growing sector, while the collaboration between a billionaire CEO and a struggling single father had evolved into a partnership that was transforming not just their individual lives, but the entire company's understanding of what technology could accomplish when human empathy guided technical innovation. The Washington State Convention Center buzzed with the energy of 1,500 healthcare professionals, technology innovators, and disability advocates who had gathered for the Pacific Northwest Medical Technology Summit. But in the backstage preparation area, Ronan Montgomery sat quietly reviewing his presentation notes while Tyler helped organize the demonstration equipment with the methodical precision of someone who had become expert at managing complex logistics. 18 months had passed since that transformative hiring event where Camille Clark's dismissive challenge had inadvertently opened doors that neither of them could have anticipated. Today, Ronan would deliver the keynote address to an audience that included many of the same medical device manufacturers who had once competed to license his graduate research, the same venture capitalists who now sought meetings with Innovation Dynamics leadership team, and the same accessibility advocates who had watched his work disappear from academic publications only to re-emerge as commercial products that were transforming lives across the country. "Dad, your hands are shaking," Tyler observed with the matter-of-fact directness that had become his trademark. At 8 years old, he had developed the kind of emotional intelligence that allowed him to provide support without creating additional pressure. Remember what Mom used to say about being nervous, meaning you care about something important. The reference to Catherine no longer brought the sharp pain that had characterized the first years after her death. Tyler's memories of his mother had evolved into sources of strength rather than grief, partly because Ronan had learned to honor her legacy through the work they were doing together, and partly because their extended family now included people who helped carry the emotional weight that had once threatened to overwhelm them both. Camille appeared in the preparation area carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of professional attire that commanded respect in any boardroom. But her demeanor had evolved from the intimidating corporate executive who had conducted that first hiring event. Her interactions with Tyler reflected 18 months of learning to communicate with someone whose intellectual gifts required the same respect she showed adult colleagues, while his sensory processing needs demanded accommodations that she now provided automatically. "The demonstration equipment is ready," she reported, setting down the coffee and reviewing the checklist that Tyler had prepared. "Maria Santos and her team are standing by for the live video connection, and the adaptive interface system is calibrated for optimal visibility in the main auditorium. Are you ready to show them what real innovation looks like?" The presentation they were about to deliver would mark the culmination of everything they had built together since that first meeting in Westlake Center's food court. But more than showcasing technological achievements, it would demonstrate how personal experience, technical expertise, and resource availability could align to create innovations that served human dignity alongside commercial success. The Adaptive Technology Research Division had exceeded every projection that Camille had presented to Innovation Dynamics Board of Directors. Revenue for the current fiscal year was approaching $75 million, significantly beyond their most optimistic 3-year projections, while customer satisfaction metrics consistently exceeded 95% across all product categories. But the numbers told only part of the story. Letters from users arrived daily, describing how the adaptive interface systems had restored their ability to communicate with family members, pursue educational goals that had seemed impossible, or return to creative work that gave their lives meaning beyond medical diagnoses and therapeutic interventions. Dr. James Patterson, a neurologist at Seattle Children's Hospital, had written to describe how the eye-tracking communication system had enabled a 12-year-old patient with severe cerebral palsy to participate in classroom discussions for the first time in his educational career. The boy's poetry, composed entirely through eye movement and displayed on adaptive screens, had been selected for publication in the hospital's literary magazine. Sarah Kim, a software engineer whose multiple sclerosis had progressively limited her fine motor control, had returned to programming using interface adaptations that translated minimal muscle movement into complex coding commands. Her first application, designed to help other people with similar conditions navigate work accommodations, had been downloaded over 50,000 times within 6 months of release. These individual success stories represented broader transformations that extended far beyond the specific people who used Innovation Dynamics products. Families who had struggled to find educational accommodations for children with developmental differences discovered that adaptive technology could provide alternatives to traditional classroom modifications. Healthcare facilities began incorporating accessibility features that improved experiences for all patients, rather than just those with officially recognized disabilities. The presentation that Ronan would deliver today would showcase these achievements. But its deeper purpose was to challenge fundamental assumptions about innovation, market potential, and the relationship between commercial success and social impact that continued to limit how technology companies approached accessibility challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference moderator announced as the main auditorium lights dimmed. Please welcome Ronan Montgomery, Director of Adaptive Technology Research at Innovation Dynamics, who will present Beyond Compliance: How Human-Centered Design Creates Market Opportunities While Serving Social Justice. The applause was respectful but reserved, reflecting an audience that had attended numerous presentations about accessibility technology without witnessing breakthroughs that justified the enthusiasm typically associated with keynote addresses. Most attendees expected another discussion of regulatory requirements and niche market opportunities rather than innovations that could transform entire industries. Ronan's opening words immediately shifted the room's energy and attention. 3 years ago, I was unemployed, struggling to support my son while working in a position that utilized almost none of my technical capabilities. Today, the research division One Direct generates more revenue than many standalone technology companies. The difference wasn't discovering new markets or developing revolutionary algorithms. The difference was remembering that every technological challenge represents someone's daily reality. The presentation that followed challenged every conventional assumption about accessibility, technology being a limited niche market with constrained commercial potential. Ronan demonstrated how user-centered design principles developed for people with disabilities consistently produced innovations that improved functionality for all users, creating broader market opportunities than companies typically recognized. Universal design isn't charity, he explained, displaying sales figures that showed how accessibility features had expanded Innovation Dynamics' customer base far beyond their original target demographics. It's sophisticated engineering that recognizes human diversity as a design challenge rather than an afterthought. When you optimize technology for people with the most complex needs, you create products that work better for everyone. The live demonstration featuring Maria Santos painting in real time using eye-tracking interfaces drew gasps from an audience that included many people who had never witnessed adaptive technology being used for creative expression rather than basic communication needs. Her artwork, a portrait of her daughter composed entirely through eye movement, illustrated how assistive technology could enable artistic achievement that transcended medical categories. This isn't just someone using adaptive equipment to overcome limitations, Ronan emphasized as Maria added final details to her digital painting. This is someone whose artistic vision is being expressed through interface design that recognizes eye movement as a sophisticated input method rather than a compensation for lost motor function. The presentation's most powerful moment came when Tyler himself took the stage, not as a demonstration subject but as a collaborator whose insights had informed every aspect of their product development process. His explanation of how sensory processing differences had guided environmental design principles throughout Innovation Dynamics facilities revealed someone who understood accessibility as A complex systems challenge rather than individual accommodation. My dad designs technology that helps people, but he also listens to people about what they actually need. Tyler explained to an audience that included some of the most influential healthcare technology leaders in the Pacific Northwest. Most companies ask disabled people to adapt to their products. We design products that adapt to people's actual lives. The questions that followed Tyler's presentation revealed how fundamentally their approach challenged standard industry practices. Audience members who had spent careers developing accessibility features as compliance obligations rather than innovation opportunities began recognizing market potential they had systematically overlooked. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Chief Technology Officer for a major medical device manufacturer, asked the question that crystallized the presentation's core message. You're suggesting that accessibility research could drive mainstream product development rather than creating separate adaptive versions. How do we justify the additional development costs when our current approach meets regulatory requirements? Ronan's response drew upon 18 months of financial data that demonstrated how human-centered design principles had reduced development costs while improving market performance across all Innovation Dynamics product categories. We don't create separate adaptive versions, he explained. We design mainstream products that accommodate human diversity from the beginning. The result is technology that works better for everyone while expanding market reach beyond traditional demographic boundaries. The presentation concluded with Camille joining Ronan and Tyler on stage to discuss how their collaboration had transformed Innovation Dynamics' entire corporate culture. Her remarks revealed someone whose understanding of business success had evolved far beyond quarterly earnings reports and market share analysis. 18 months ago, I thought I was hiring someone to solve technical problems that our development teams couldn't address, Camille explained to the audience. What I discovered was that the most important innovations emerge when personal experience, technical expertise, and resource availability align in service of human dignity rather than simply profit maximization. She described how the adaptive Technology Research Division's success had inspired other Innovation Dynamics teams to adopt similar human-centered approaches, leading to improvements in their core medical software that better serve both healthcare providers and patients. The company's workspace modifications, originally implemented to accommodate Tyler's sensory processing needs, had improved productivity and job satisfaction for employees across all departments. The return on investment has exceeded our most optimistic projections, Camille continued. But more importantly, our work has meaning that extends beyond financial metrics. We're creating technology that restores possibilities people thought they had permanently lost. The standing ovation that followed their presentation lasted nearly 5 minutes, but the real measure of their impact became clear during the reception that followed. Lines of conference attendees approached their booth with questions about licensing opportunities, partnership possibilities, and consultation services that could help other companies implement similar approaches to accessibility innovation. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the University of Washington's Medical School described plans to incorporate their design principles into biomedical engineering curricula, ensuring that future researchers would understand accessibility as a fundamental design consideration rather than specialized accommodation. 3 venture capital firms requested meetings to discuss funding for expanded research initiatives, while 2 major healthcare systems wanted to pilot comprehensive accessibility upgrades using Innovation Dynamics consultation services. The conversation that meant most to Ronan came from Kevin Montgomery, his younger brother, who had traveled from their hometown to attend the presentation. Kevin's cerebral palsy remained unchanged, but the adaptive technology that Ronan had developed enabled him to participate in the conference as a fully engaged attendee rather than someone requiring special assistance. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Kevin signed, his communication device translating his gestures into spoken words, that drew no attention from surrounding conversations. But I'm more proud that you found a way to honor Catherine's memory while building a life that serves other families facing similar challenges. The recognition that their work represented more than successful product development or profitable business expansion became clear as the day progressed. Local media coverage focused not just on Innovation Dynamics' financial success, but on how their approach had created employment opportunities for people with disabilities, influenced legislative discussions about accessibility requirements, and inspired other companies to reconsider their own product development methodologies. Tyler's presence throughout the conference had challenged attendees' assumptions about children's capacity to contribute meaningfully to professional discussions. His insights about user experience and environmental design were quoted in several interviews, while his artwork inspired by adaptive technology demonstrations was featured in conference promotional materials. As evening approached and the convention center gradually emptied, Ronan found himself reflecting on how completely his life had transformed since that first hiring event where Camille's dismissive challenge had accidentally opened opportunities neither of them could have anticipated. The man who had once struggled to balance survival-level employment with single parenthood was now directing research initiatives that influenced industry standards and policy discussions nationwide. But the most significant transformation wasn't professional recognition or financial security. It was the understanding that innovation emerged not from individual genius or resource availability alone, but from collaboration that honored both human dignity and economic sustainability. Their partnership had created something that neither could have achieved independently, a framework for using technology in service of human flourishing while building sustainable business success. The challenge that Camille had posed 18 months earlier, "Challenge me and I'll hire you," had been fulfilled in ways that exceeded anything either of them had imagined possible. Ronan had challenged not just her assumptions about problem-solving approaches, but her entire understanding of what business success could accomplish when guided by purpose. Beyond profit maximization, standing in the quiet convention center as cleanup crews prepared for the next day's events, surrounded by demonstration equipment that had enabled real-time examples of how technology could restore human dignity alongside commercial viability, they recognized that their collaboration had achieved something far more valuable than either individual success or corporate achievement. They had proven that the most meaningful innovations emerge when personal experience, technical expertise, and resource availability align in service of communities whose potential had been systematically overlooked by conventional approaches to product development and market analysis. The keynote presentation had showcased their technological achievements, but the real accomplishment was demonstrating that business success and social impact could reinforce each other when innovation was guided by genuine understanding of human need rather than abstract market research and demographic analysis. As they packed up their materials and prepared to return to their daily work of developing the next generation of accessibility innovations, Ronan and Camille understood that they had found something far more valuable than either employment or professional recognition. They had discovered a partnership that enabled them to contribute their individual gifts while building something greater than the sum of their separate capabilities. Tyler's sleepy observation as they loaded equipment into Camille's car captured the essence of what they had accomplished together. "Dad, you didn't just get a job. You found a way to help people and make our family stronger at the same time." The challenge had been met, the recognition had been earned, but the real transformation was just beginning as their work continued to influence how entire industries understood the relationship between human dignity, technological innovation, and sustainable business success. 3 years after that transformative keynote presentation at the Pacific Northwest Medical Technology Summit, the Innovation Dynamics campus in Georgetown had evolved into something unprecedented in the technology industry. What had begun as a converted warehouse serving the adaptive technology research division had expanded into a 20-acre complex that functioned as both cutting-edge research facility and living demonstration of how inclusive design principles could create environments where human diversity was celebrated rather than merely accommodated. The morning sun streamed through skylights, designed to provide natural illumination while minimizing glare that could cause sensory overload, while soundproofing materials reduced ambient noise without creating the sterile atmosphere typical of corporate facilities. Workspaces accommodated employees with varying physical capabilities, sensory processing differences, and cognitive styles, but the accommodations were so seamlessly integrated that visitors often failed to recognize them as accessibility features. Rather than simply thoughtful design, Ronan Montgomery's office occupied a corner of the main research building, but calling it an office understated its function as a collaboration space, where breakthrough innovations emerged from conversations between engineers, disability advocates, healthcare providers, and the end users whose insights guided every aspect of product development. The walls displayed not just patents and industry awards, but artwork created by people using adaptive interfaces, photographs from user testing sessions, and handwritten letters from families whose lives had been transformed by technology that recognized human dignity alongside commercial viability. At 35, Ronan had achieved professional recognition that exceeded anything he had imagined during his graduate school years. But more importantly, he had learned to balance innovation with the personal relationships that gave his work meaning. Tyler, now 11 years old, continued to serve as an unofficial consultant whose insights about accessibility and user experience influenced product development across all Innovation Dynamics divisions. The morning routine that had once required military-level coordination to balance survival-level employment with single parenthood had evolved into a comfortable rhythm that accommodated both professional responsibilities and family priorities. Tyler's educational needs were now met by a specialized program that recognized his intellectual gifts while providing accommodations for sensory processing differences, allowing him to thrive academically without the constant advocacy battles that had characterized their earlier years. "Dad, the prototype for the new communication device is working perfectly," Tyler announced as he entered Ronan's office carrying a tablet that displayed test results from the latest adaptive interface system. His technical vocabulary and analytical thinking had developed to the point where he could contribute meaningfully to product development discussions, but his insights remained grounded in the lived experience of someone who understood accessibility as a daily reality rather than theoretical concept. The communication device Tyler referenced represented the latest breakthrough in a research program that had expanded far beyond Innovation Dynamics' original focus on medical technology. Educational applications, workplace accommodations, and recreational accessibility had become equally important market sectors as their human-centered design principles proved effective across multiple domains of human activity. Camille Clark's transformation had been equally profound, though perhaps less visible to external observers. Her corner office on the 68th floor of the Columbia Center remained impressive, but its function had evolved from isolated command center to collaborative workspace where strategic decisions emerged from consultation with diverse stakeholders. Rather than purely financial analysis. Innovation Dynamics' success had attracted attention from competitors, investors, and policymakers worldwide. But Camille had learned to measure achievement according to criteria that extended far beyond quarterly earnings reports and market share analysis. The company's influence on industry standards, employment practices, and social policy had become equally important indicators of whether their work was fulfilling its intended purpose. The European Union wants to base their new accessibility regulations on our design standards, Camille announced as she joined the morning planning session that had become a daily ritual for the leadership team. 3 major technology companies have requested consultation services to implement similar human-centered approaches, And the Department of Health and Human Services is piloting our recommendations for medical device procurement standards. The ripple effects of their collaboration had extended far beyond Innovation Dynamics' immediate business success. Universities across the country had modified biomedical engineering curricula to emphasize accessibility as a fundamental design consideration, rather than specialized accommodation. Venture capital firms had established funding categories specifically for accessibility innovation, while healthcare systems were incorporating universal design principles into facility planning and equipment procurement, the employment model. They had pioneered flexible arrangements that accommodated personal circumstances, while enabling professional contribution, had influenced labor practices throughout the technology sector. Other companies had discovered that accommodating employees' caregiving responsibilities, health conditions, and diverse work styles often improved productivity and innovation, while reducing turnover costs. Dr. Sarah Chun had become a frequent collaborator, establishing a joint research program between the University of Washington and Innovation Dynamics that ensured academic investigation could inform commercial development while maintaining rigorous scientific standards. Graduate students competed for internship opportunities that provided exposure to real-world accessibility challenges alongside theoretical study. The partnership with Professor Chen's lab has produced 4 patent applications this quarter, reported Dr. Lisa Park, who had joined Innovation Dynamics after completing her PhD in assistive technology development. More importantly, we've identified 3 research directions that could expand accessibility options for people with cognitive differences, an area where existing technology remains inadequate. The research pipeline that emerged from their academic collaborations ensured that Innovation Dynamics maintained its competitive advantage while contributing to the broader knowledge base that could benefit all companies working in accessibility technology. Their willingness to publish research findings and share design principles had accelerated industry-wide progress rather than simply protecting proprietary advantages. Tyler's role in the organization had evolved from informal consultant to official youth advisor, a position that involved conducting user testing with other young people who used adaptive technology, providing feedback on educational applications, and helping to ensure that product development remained grounded in real-world usability rather than abstract engineering specifications. His artwork, inspired by the intersection of technology and human experience, had been featured in galleries and museums as examples of how adaptive interfaces could enable creative expression that transcended traditional categories of ability and disability. The pieces he created using eye-tracking systems and modified input devices challenged viewers to reconsider assumptions about artistic capability and technological possibility. The art therapy program at Seattle Children's Hospital wants to expand their use of our interface systems, Tyler reported during the morning meeting. I told them I could help train other kids to use the equipment, but only if they promise to let people create whatever they want instead of just using it for communication exercises. The integration of artistic applications with therapeutic and educational uses had become one of Innovation Dynamics' most successful product categories, demonstrating how accessibility technology could serve human creativity alongside practical functionality. Museums and cultural institutions worldwide had begun incorporating their interface systems to ensure that artistic experiences remained available to visitors with diverse capabilities. The financial success that had enabled this expansion remained impressive by any industry standard. Innovation Dynamics revenue had exceeded $200 million annually, with profit margins that satisfied even the most demanding investors. But the company's influence extended far beyond its direct commercial success to include policy changes, industry standards, and cultural shifts that were transforming how society approached accessibility and inclusion. Government contracts now represented 30% of their business, as federal agencies recognized that accessibility technology developed through genuine consultation with disabled communities consistently outperformed products created according to compliance-focused specifications. International markets had opened as other countries adopted similar procurement standards based on human-centered design principles. The Georgetown campus had become a destination for delegations from technology companies, healthcare organizations, and government agencies seeking to understand how accessibility innovation could serve both social justice and commercial success. Tours were conducted not by marketing staff, but by employees with disabilities who could explain how inclusive workplace design had enabled them to contribute their professional capabilities without requiring special accommodations. Maria Santos, whose artistic breakthrough during their first product demonstration had helped validate their approach, now served as Director of User Experience, leading a team that ensured all Innovation Dynamics products underwent extensive testing with diverse user communities before reaching commercial markets. Her department had become a model for how technology companies could incorporate disabled people's expertise throughout the product development process, rather than treating accessibility as an afterthought. We've received funding proposals from 12 different research institutions wanting to establish similar collaboration programs, Maria reported during their quarterly review meeting. The National Science Foundation is considering making user consultation a requirement for all assistive technology grants, based on the success we've demonstrated here. The influence on academic research standards represented one of their most significant long-term achievements, ensuring that future innovations would be grounded in genuine understanding of user needs, rather than theoretical assumptions about what disabled people might find helpful. Graduate students were now required to spend significant time working directly with disabled communities before proposing research projects. The partnership between Ronan and Camille had evolved into something that neither traditional employment nor conventional business ownership could adequately describe. Their working relationship was built on mutual respect, complementary expertise, and shared commitment to using technology in service of human flourishing while maintaining sustainable business practices. Evening conversations in Ronan's office, with Tyler completing homework assignments while contributing occasional insights to product development discussions, had become family meetings where professional objectives blended seamlessly with personal care and shared vision for positive change. The boundaries between work and family had blurred in ways that enriched both domains rather than creating conflict. Camille's personal life had been equally transformed by their collaboration. Her relationship with David, the venture capitalist from San Francisco, had been rekindled and strengthened by her evolving understanding of success and meaningful achievement. Their engagement announcement had surprised industry observers who remembered her previous reputation for prioritizing business objectives over personal relationships. David understands that this work matters more than maximizing short-term profits, Camille explained during an interview with Seattle Business Journal. Our relationship works because we share values about using professional success to create positive change rather than simply accumulating wealth for its own sake. The wedding plans reflected the same inclusive design principles that guided Innovation Dynamics product development, with venue accessibility, communication accommodations, and sensory considerations that ensured all guests could participate fully in the celebration. Tyler had been chosen as ring bearer, his presence symbolizing how their professional collaboration had evolved into genuine family connection. The legacy of their partnership extended beyond Innovation Dynamics to influence how entire industries approached the relationship between commercial success and social responsibility. Technology companies that had once viewed accessibility as costly compliance obligation had discovered market opportunities that emerged when products were designed to serve human diversity rather than narrow demographic assumptions. Healthcare systems worldwide were implementing design standards based on their research, creating environments that reduced anxiety and sensory overload while improving functionality for all patients, rather than just those with officially recognized disabilities. Educational institutions had adopted similar principles, recognizing that learning environments optimized for students with the most complex needs consistently produced better outcomes for all learners. As the 5th anniversary of their first meeting approached, Ronan and Camille reflected on how completely their lives had been transformed by what had begun as a chance encounter during a routine hiring event. The challenge that Camille had posed, "Challenge me and I'll hire you," had been fulfilled in ways that neither could have anticipated, creating changes that extended far beyond their individual circumstances. Tyler's observation during their anniversary planning meeting captured the essence of what they had accomplished together. You didn't just challenge each other. You challenged everyone to think differently about what technology should do for people. The foundation they had established would continue expanding opportunities for people whose potential had been constrained by inadequate accommodation rather than actual limitation. Scholarship programs, research grants, and mentorship initiatives ensured that future generations would have access to resources and support systems that could prevent talented individuals from facing the impossible choices between family responsibilities and professional contribution. Standing in the Innovation Dynamics campus that had grown from a converted warehouse into a model for inclusive innovation, surrounded by employees whose diverse capabilities had been recognized and celebrated rather than merely accommodated. They understood that their greatest achievement wasn't commercial success or industry recognition. They had proven that meaningful change was possible when individual circumstances aligned with systemic opportunity, when personal experience informed professional expertise, and when resource availability was guided by genuine commitment to human dignity rather than abstract market analysis. The story that had begun with a dismissive challenge from a lonely CEO to a struggling single father had evolved into a movement that was transforming how society understood the relationship between human potential, technological innovation, and the responsibility that successful people had to create opportunities for others whose gifts remained hidden beneath practical necessities. Their collaboration continued to generate innovations that restored possibilities people had believed permanently lost, while demonstrating that the most sustainable business success emerged when profit motivation aligned with purpose that extended beyond individual achievement to serve communities whose needs had been systematically overlooked by conventional approaches to product development and market analysis. The challenge had been met, the transformation had been sustained, and the ripple effects continued expanding outward, proving that individual courage to remain open to unexpected connections could create changes that influenced entire industries, while restoring hope to families who had learned to expect that their needs would remain unmet by existing systems and solutions. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.